On this episode, we'll discuss building a culture of digital storytelling in the church. Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast, the show that is dedicated to inspiring leaders and empowering healthy churches. I'm Kendall Connor, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jess Moore. How are you today, Jess?
Hey, Kendall, I am doing great.
It's a great day for a podcast. I'm excited to jump into our conversation today.
Me too. Yeah, I love the storytelling idea. I think as a marketing person, it's so important, often underrated. So this should be a good conversation.
I love it. There's so much power in storytelling, right? And we've seen that in scripture. We see it. I feel like you talk about marketing. I mean, the best marketing involves story, but I mean, in every
Yeah.
area of communication, storytelling is a big deal. And so I
Oh, yeah.
know for all of these church leaders that are listening today, this is going to be really helpful because I feel like you've got so many good things happening in our churches. It's just good to get those stories out, and stories are so compelling. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to jump into it today. We have a great guest that's going to be joining us, Adam Erickson. And for all of our listeners out there, if you have not connected with Adam before, I want to tell you a little bit about him. Adam Erickson has spent the past 17 years working with churches and nonprofits, helping them tell stories of life change.
Hmm.
And now he teaches through something called Smartphone Storytellers. This is a free platform that is designed to train missionaries and nonprofits all about how to tell those stories using a smartphone, that same smartphone that they have in their pocket that they're using for everything else, right? They can do
So
something positive
practical.
with it. Yeah, it's so cool. Alongside that, he teaches courses at Moody Bible Institute and Charleston Southern University. And he also works as a filmmaker at Seacoast Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Very cool church. When he's not serving, I love this about him. He says that he spends time sailing with his family. So I'm actually kind of hoping that he'll tell
Ooh,
us a little bit about that because I'm going to be honest, I know nothing about that, Jess.
I don't know a whole lot either. I tried sailing and wasn't for me. Got so seasick, but I
Oh,
am eager to hear about it.
that's what I say too. Storytelling, sailing. Hopefully going to hear it all today. We're going to talk all about this building a culture of digital storytelling. We talk about the digital side of things so often
Mm.
on this podcast. So I know it's going to be great. Before we jump in, I want to encourage all of the listeners out there, hit that follow button. We want to have you subscribe to wherever you're enjoying our show. We want to make sure that you stay in the loop. Come on, because we're releasing these conversations that are just, I know are going to have valuable resources. We have these
Hmm.
things just teaching you how to do these practical things in ministry. That's the best way to make sure that you don't miss a thing. And hey, I want to give a small plug too. Leave a comment. You can comment over on YouTube. You can comment on Spotify. And we love reading those, or even just leave us a review over on Apple. It means so much to us. Well, hey, just without further ado, I want to jump into our conversation. Let's welcome Adam Erickson to the show. How are you today, Adam?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing really well. Thanks for making time to chat with us today.
Oh yeah, definitely. Looking forward to the conversation. And I have to say, Jess, you can still go sailing even if you get seasick. My time's out on if I'm in a harbor, I'm fine. If I go out onto
Yeah.
the open ocean, I've got to have a patch. Otherwise, let's just say I'm the same. I'm in the no pun intended same boat.
Yeah. Yes. And in all fairness, you're not wrong. The first time I went out, I grew up in South Florida. So it was open ocean, Atlantic, and it was very wavy. So I do need to try again. I live in Tulsa now, and we've got so many lakes, and we do have people
Mm,
that sail. So I probably need to give it another go.
Yeah, lake sailing's a great way to jump into it.
I love that. And like I said, I know nothing about that world. So maybe I got to do some Googling, or maybe we got to have a follow-up conversation, Adam, after this. So I can learn more about this world. Well, other than the sailing, and something that we always ask from all of our guests is, okay, what's something that doesn't make that public bio that all your family and friends would know about you, Adam?
So this is more one of those kind of random facts, but in there was nothing else that happened the month that this happened. But I was nominated and given the award of the Citizen of the Month for the town I live in, Hanahan, South Carolina. And it would nothing overshadowed it in the month of March 2020. So that was
Oh,
an
wow.
honor. And
That's so cool. Can we ask
so
how you got the award or
Yeah.
how you were nominated?
they were wanting to make a video for a contest to have I forget which show it was. I think it was like This Old Town or something like that. But they were going to come and
Oh, wow.
revitalize the downtown of whatever town was picked. And so
Okay.
I've known the mayor for years, and so she reached out and said, "Hey, we want to do this project. Would you be willing to do it?" So jumped in, made a video with them, and we had a lot of
Oh,
fun.
so
Didn't get
cool.
nominated on the official end, but still had fun, and I got some out of it. But
That's
That's
more
very
more fun.
awesome.
cool. I'm
Claim to
telling you,
fame.
yeah, that maybe that should make the public bio, Adam. I mean, that'd be great, like in a LinkedIn or something, you know? That's awesome.
So
So
you
cool.
mentioned claim to fame. My usual, what I would call my lame claim to fame, and I don't mean this as any negative towards him because I love him, but years ago I spent the 4th of July with Al Roker, and I
Oh,
once
I
there
love
was
Al
Wow.
Roker.
he's great, he's an incredibly nice guy, but
Oh, you can
on
tell.
Twitter hashtag lame claim to fame was trending, and so I put my lame claim to fame was I spent the 4th of July with Al Roker. Just, lightheartedly, because I'm
Yeah,
like, that's
Yeah.
a lame
sure.
reason to be famous, is they spent some time
I
with
think it's
a famous
rad,
guy.
but go
And then
ahead.
he saw it and responded and said, "I hope you enjoyed it." I was like, "Oh, no. No, Al, I loved it. It was great. That was no shade to you." So, Al, if you're listening, I promise it was no shade to you.
I hope Al's listening. If you're listening, Al, I love you.
That would number
Huge fan.
one, yeah, that would be amazing just in general. But who knows? You never know how all these things. We'll have to tag him in our when we will publish this episode. That's that's so cool, and it's also good to hear. Anytime you hear about a celebrity, it's like, are they really nice? You got to
Yeah.
know. It's so cool to hear when they are super nice, the same as they are on camera as they are in person, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Adam, you've spent your career, you're helping ministries and nonprofits communicate clearly in a digital world. You do so much with filmmaking and all of these different things. How did you first become passionate about this? How did storytelling get to be such a big part of what you do?
Not to give the whole life story, but I first was kind of exposed to the use of video was when I was growing up. My grandfather and my father, and they would use these words too, made the dumbest videos. Like they were just them having fun with actually the camera's right back there, but it's
Oh,
an old
cool.
VHS camera, and these were just videos for the sake of having fun with videos. But
Yeah.
seeing them have fun with it, I was like, I want to start doing that. So I remember in high school, I started to do that for my youth group. And then they're like, hey, you've got a talent for this. And so I remember when I kind of realized the power of video was
Mm.
I think it was Easter. Our church, we had an overflow service in the gym. And so they just ran, this was,
Mm.
I'm old. This was years ago. And it was basically a camera like that. And so they ran all the cabling down and everything. We weren't running this over the internet. And they just said, "Hey, Adam, would you run this camera? Just do your typical camera one shot that you'd have at church on Sunday
Yeah.
morning, and just track with the worship leader or with the pastor." So I'm tracking along with him. And at one point, the youth pastor leaned down and said, "Hey, just so you know, this is coming up," because we didn't have comms or anything. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's good to know." And then I looked back at the camera, and the pastor had walked off. And so I
Oh,
quickly but smoothly on this terrible tripod got the shot lined up again, and that afternoon, I was talking to the youth pastor's wife, who was actually in the overflow room, and she said the entire room, who was just sitting there, when he goes behind the screen, when he walks off screen,
Yeah.
she just saw the entire room go lean to the side, as if they were like,
Mm.
"Oh, let me just lean." He's just behind
right.
that pillar, and just for this room to just get so locked in
Right.
and
Yeah.
realize that they almost, even if they didn't think he was in the room, felt like he was in the room to respond that
Yeah.
way. I realized
Mm.
there's power in this. And so when I
Yeah.
went to
Yeah.
college, kept doing videos like that, and just volunteered at my church, fell in love with it, and kind of at one point realized people are doing this as a career. I was going for youth
Mm.
ministry, and I was like, wait, but people are doing video as a career, and obviously I like doing it. So
Yeah.
prayed about it that summer, switched over, and haven't really looked back. And just continually learning, and hopefully making better videos than I used to make.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that is incredible, and it's funny how just these small sparks can really change kind of your trajectory of your life, and
Mhm.
how you can use these talents and gifts and things that God has put inside you, these passions, to make a big difference. And so I love hearing stories like that. Well, I know there's also the side you help these missionaries. How did you get a passion for that?
So I've had the opportunity basically ever since high school to travel almost every year internationally, and almost always, I think with the exception of one trip, I've had some camera in my hand, or I've been going for the purpose of capturing video.
Mhm.
And back in 2014, I had the opportunity to go to Togo and kind of build some relationships with some ministries there, and ended up going back every year afterwards.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've learned through these types of trips was that we go over with a plan to like, hey, we want to tell this story, and this story. And, I'm brought over as the filmmaker, like, hey, can you capture these? But then we get over there and we start talking with people, building relationships, and you start to hear another story and another story and another
Right.
story.
Mm.
And you realize there are more stories worth telling than time and resources to tell them right now.
Right.
Because even if I was doing this full time, my only gig, money wasn't an issue. I don't have enough time to tell all the stories worth telling,
Right.
even
Sure.
for one ministry. And so I realized I'm like, I want to find a way to equip, missionaries and nonprofits to be able to start telling these stories without having to worry about like, hey, how do I fundraise to get a filmmaker over here? Because even if the
Mhm.
filmmaker's volunteering, it still takes money to get over there, even
Sure.
on the ground. Like we have to feed them, make sure they have a place to sleep. I'm not picky. Give me a spot on the floor, but still, you have to figure out those logistics.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then a couple years later, over there we work with pastors who are born and raised in Togo, and we said, hey, there's people all over Togo who are doing this work. We just want to make sure that they can take some basic pictures, and so we did a cell phone drive per se, and at the church, and people just donated old cell phones. And this was years ago, but even then they were getting like iPhone 10s and
Wow.
slightly
Yeah.
newer phones, which is kind of when the cameras started to get, oh, this
Yeah.
isn't terrible anymore. And I
Right.
realized I'm like, there are now pastors in the middle of nowhere Togo who have a great camera that if they just knew how to use it, they could start telling some amazing stories. They just need to know
Mm.
like, how do they use this gear? Like give them the knowledge because they've already got the gear.
Adam, this is
Wow.
so cool.
It
This is
really is.
awesome.
It is. I'm just kind of curious. So it's out of that it's called Smartphone Storytellers began, right? That's the platform that
Yeah.
you've created to help with this.
Yep. Yeah. And it started out kind of as, just looking for opportunities when I was traveling. I'd do trainings in the countries I was in. But I wanted to take it beyond that because, like I said, I can't travel all the time. And even then, when you run into translation issues and things like that, it
Yeah.
becomes even more
Mm.
difficult. And so one of the things I wanted to start doing was how do I transition this to being an online program? And so kind of my proof of concept that I played with that I'll admit I've kind of fallen out of the routine of doing in the midst of doing some other things, but I want to get back into the routine of doing is doing trainings on YouTube. And these aren't
Mm.
necessarily like formal, like the step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4
Sure.
Sure.
trainings, but it's all right. Let's talk about like what is an ND filter? Why would you even want an ND filter? And then
Yeah.
I'll look at one like here's one on the market. Like how does this work out for you?
Mhm.
But getting back to the initial point, like if I say to someone who's not a filmmaker, oh, you just need an ND filter, like what is that? Well, it's basically
Yeah, I don't
sunglasses
know
for
what
your
that is.
camera. And
Oh.
here's how it affects your camera. And here's how it
Yeah.
affects your image and your settings and why it's something that you might want to consider. Like it's not a necessity, but if you want to take your
Right.
filmmaking from here to
Right.
here, it might be worth considering. And so
Mhm.
basically just creating content that answers some of those questions, but also teaches like how do you tell a story? Like how do you figure out what goes into a story? How do you structure your story? How do you find stories? So that's kind of the heart behind what I do on YouTube.
Wow.
And the main reason behind that is I never want to gatekeep any of this behind a paywall.
Mm.
Obviously, I want to figure out a way to make this my main thing I'm doing so that this is if someone says, oh, what do you do full time? Like I teach people how to tell
Sure.
stories with their smartphone. Like, but
So
I
Wow.
never ever want to like fleece missionaries. I never want to pull from
Right.
funds that they're already,
Yeah.
money's tight. Like ministry
Sure.
money is tight,
Mhm.
so I don't want to pull
Mhm.
from that money.
Well, I love your heart in that. It's really special. I mean, just hearing how, you have a group of people who it's like they have stories that are worth telling, right? That's something.
Mhm.
These missionaries and even the churches, right? Like there's so many stories of what God is doing. I'm just kind of curious, whether it's the missionary side, whether it's churches, what do you see that are the biggest barriers that keep ministries from telling their stories well?
So I think part of it is ministries and people in ministry don't always think that they are equipped to tell a story. And I don't even actually mean
Mm.
from the technical standpoint. I mean, that is a part of it, but they don't. You'll a lot of times people hear someone say, I'm not creative. But then you start talking to them and you're like, hey, how did you solve this problem? And they tell you like, oh, well, I figured it out in doing this and this and this. Like a teacher who like, how did you solve the problem of reaching this student? Well, I realized that they did this, and they come up with a creative solution. And we kind of realize that there's more creativity in us than I think we sometimes give credit
Mhm.
to. Um, and I look at that from the angle of like storytelling. You can be a storyteller even if you're not a full-time, this is my career storyteller. And
Right.
so that's one of the things I try to equip people with. The idea is like give yourself the credit. You are a storyteller. You can be a storyteller. It's just a matter of figuring out like what are the knowledge gaps that you have, whether it is in
Mhm.
the technical, whether it's in finding those stories. Just identifying those knowledge gaps and helping them to gain the confidence to be able to say like, no, I am a storyteller.
Right. Yeah, it's not as complex as sometimes I feel like we build it up in our mind to be, right?
Mm.
It's and also the side of gear. I love that you show people that it doesn't take a full production suite. It doesn't take, the nicest camera to be able to do that. And I feel like we're seeing that a little bit in the culture, right? Like you go on platforms like TikTok and Instagram and places like this. It's not always the most viral content, so to speak, isn't necessarily the ones that are
Right.
created with the best cameras. It's the ones that have a compelling story, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and I remember it's not quite as much of a trend now, but on TikTok for a while, there was a trend where the video would start and someone would just say story time. And it would literally just be them holding their
Right.
phone like this, like
Right.
right up to their face and just talking.
Yeah.
But not high, like I would say almost no production value. But
Right.
I
Yes.
would still sit through those. 'Cause I'm like, oh, story time. Like I want to hear the story. Like what story are you telling? And if they told a good story, yeah, sure, you could tell it better if you had the equipment and everything. But it all comes down to that initial story. Like how do you
Yes.
craft your story to pull people in? And then you can figure out like, hey, is there extra gear that's needed? Is there anything that would add to this, or is the story alone enough?
Mhm. It's good.
That is very good. When it comes to the context of the local church, what does it mean to have storytelling or even digital storytelling?
Honestly, it's identifying those impacts that your ministries are having, and that doesn't necessarily mean numbers. Like, numbers can be helpful metrics to figure out where you're at with things, but it really comes down to identifying the stories of, "Hey, there was this one person who because we had this, I'm just gonna make up a ministry, but like we had this food pantry. Like there was this
Mhm.
family who
Sure.
came to us. Once again, this is a made up story. There's a family who came to us and said, we don't know how we're gonna make it or anything, and they reached out to us, and we had this food pantry, and it gave them this hope. And because they had that hope, they got plugged into our community, and they were able to find a job. Like it doesn't have to be the most dramatic story, but
Right.
identifying those stories of impact that are happening in your ministry. Um, Helps to show people how you're using your funds, how you're using your resources, how you're spending your time, and how you're ultimately having
Mm,
an impact. Because people are more interested, they're less interested in the numbers. Like, yeah, it's great to hear sometimes, like, oh, at our Easter services, we had 50,000 people or whatever number, is thrown
Sure.
out there.
yes. Yes.
And, that's like, oh, that's cool. But I'm more interested in hearing about the one story of the one person of that 50,000 who was impacted and said, hey, you know what? They were against the church, but they came reluctantly with their family, and this Easter service connected with them and had an impact on their
Mm,
lives. And they realized, hey, I want to turn that corner and make that difference, because that puts it all into perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and it helps people to see like, hey, this is having an impact, and it's not necessarily about the numbers. You do want to keep those metrics and those numbers just to figure out like, hey,
yes.
how are things going? But
Yes.
that's not the thing. You need to focus on the stories. It's finding that story, the one, finding that the family, those
Mhm.
smaller
Yes.
stories.
That is so good and in so
So
much
powerful.
alignment with yeah, I mean, yep, we could wrap up right now, and I feel like this would be super impactful. We're not going to, but that's so good.
Well, and just to call out a couple things that you said. Number one, we talk about giving quite a bit. Giving is such a big part of what fuels ministry in the church, and
Mhm.
it makes such a big impact when it goes beyond just us standing on a Sunday morning and presenting um, an opportunity to give versus telling those stories and highlighting those things that are happening because of your giving.
Mhm.
And I think about that even in the I think about that even when you're telling stories beyond the Sunday morning experience when you're sending emails, right? When you're telling stories in your emails, on your social media posts, on your website, having all of these different digital places for your stories, being able to highlight the things that are actually happening in your ministry. I'm scrolling through my feed this morning and I see a local ministry that we support, and it was not fancy. I'm telling you, it was the opposite of professional and sophisticated. It was literally a cell phone. They were going around and they were just showing the meals that they were serving on a random Wednesday. And from that moment, I mean, it didn't take a lot, but it was just kind of show and tell of the impact that was happening because of the giving that enabled that. And it meant a lot to me, right? Because I was able to see it and I was able to see the impact that was happening. And that was again, that was super simple. I do love the more impressive storytelling, and that is what you said. You pull someone aside and you say, you tell the story of how it made a difference in their life specifically. My question to you, Adam, is to me, those are two different sides. There's just showing what's happening, and then it's like mining out for that story of the individual. Do you have any tips on that? How do you find the right person to talk to? How do you find, that one person to highlight and tell something that goes to the next level?
Good question.
It all comes down to really building those relationships and finding
Mm.
those stories. And you're probably already building the relationships in your ministry just naturally. But
Mhm.
we've tried in the past to pull in stories, like just have people say, "Hey, submit your story," and it's
Mm.
not usually gotten much of a response. You'll get a couple things here and there, but
Sure.
honestly, you don't get too much if you just say, "Hey, if you've got a story of how God's acting or working in your life, send it to stories@yourchurch.org." Like you might get a couple. You might get a couple of
Hmm.
zealous people who have some great stories. But honestly, the bulk of the stories that I've found in the church are when you're visiting. Like our church is multi-campus, and I've visited campuses as part of my role, and it's one of the favorite things I get to do. And every time I'm at a campus, I've got two roles. One is, film, get new B-roll, so we've got it just in the bank for any upcoming projects. But the other thing is just to talk to people, build relationships, meet some people I don't know, and hear stories of how God is working at that campus, or through the relationships of small groups at that campus or whatever it might be, and
Yeah.
find out stories of like people who are being impacted. One of my favorite stories, I won't tell the whole thing, but one of my favorite stories I found one time at a campus was I wasn't actually even trying to get this. I was getting another shot, and the greeter lady who was holding the door open sparked up a conversation. So I got my shot, and then I turned to talk to her, and she's very, very like willing to share right off the bat. And she shared that she was a former Wiccan who came to know
Wow.
Christ because um, her FedEx driver pulled up and had Christian music playing in the
Mm.
truck. Pulled
Wow.
up, and she just happened to be just happened to be on the front porch as this pulled up, and they ended up getting into a conversation. The FedEx driver shared Christ with her and
Whoa.
then connected her with someone who happened to be, or not connected, that shared Christ with her, led her to Christ. And then she connected with an old friend who happened to go to our campus, and then,
Mhm.
came to the campus and just completely turned her life around. And it was this story that, like, one of the things I loved is it wasn't a story of what God did through our church. It was just a story of what God did.
Mhm.
And
Right.
yeah, our church played a small part in like, hey, this is a story of one of the people at our church. But it wasn't flaunting what we've done. It was flaunting what God's doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
And
good.
so it literally was a conversation that started just because I was in the right place at the right time and was able to put down my work for a minute, even though
Yeah.
my job was to get video, but to say, no, it's more important right now to build this relationship and to hear her story. And even if it was never told anywhere, I was encouraged by it. I was like,
Yeah.
man, we serve a cool God. But beyond
Yeah.
that, like it was a story that I was able to come back and say, hey, we need to tell the story about the former Wiccan who came to know Christ because of her FedEx
I
driver,
Yeah.
which
love it.
you give that log line and immediately people are like, sorry, what? Please tell me
Yeah.
I'm
more.
hooked. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
I
it.
I love that you said you're kind of just showing off what God has done. And it's like, sometimes as ministers, we can be hesitant to share stories that we feel like it's bragging on us or bragging on our church or bragging on any of those things. We don't ever want to come off that it's, like that we're trying to show off. But there is something I feel like you can get a little bit of permission when you say, uh, we want to spend time, we want to tell the story so that we can brag on what God is doing.
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
is a story that I think that any person who's committed to ministry feels comfortable doing. Look at what God has done in this season, in this person, in this story, and not make it again, and not making it about showing off what your church has done or what you've done, but just showing off how God is moving. I feel like that is an easier story to tell, even than trying to say, "Look what's happening at our church or ministry." Sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same story from a different perspective because, yeah,
mm,
our church played a role in that and
yeah,
gave her a community that she was able to plug in and help to, help her to then take the step from, all right, new Christian to what does it look like to live as a Christian? But
yeah,
Mm,
it's still kind of pivoting to say, yeah, you look at something that we get to be a part of, but honestly, look at ultimately what our great God does.
mm.
it's good.
Yeah, I love that heart posture and that. I'm just curious. I mean, if someone wanted to start in this today, and I mean, again, like we're saying, all you need to get started with something like this is the smartphone in your pocket. I mean, what are some practical ways to get started with this? I mean, is it best for digital storytelling to shoot vertical and try to make stories for social media, or would it be better to film them sideways and put it up on your screen at church? Like what's some practical getting starting tips that you have?
Honestly, that's gonna be different, I think, for every church and for what the purpose of the video is. If
Mm.
you're creating something that you're wanting to encourage your church body, like maybe there's no call to action at the end because sometimes the story will have a
Mm,
call to action, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's literally just, hey, let's just like essentially worship God through saying like, look at this cool thing that He's done, and let's praise Him for it. And
yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
there's no call to action at those stories, and those are some of my favorites because there's no motive beyond just like
Yeah.
let's celebrate God. But
Mm,
if you're creating a story like that, you want to shoot it more in the unless your screens happen to be vertical, which I have come across those before. But you want to shoot it in more the traditional landscape format, like for YouTube, for TV type format. But if you're wanting to do this as something to like talk about a ministry on social media or anything, then you're going to want to go with the vertical.
mhm.
It's all about knowing why are you telling the story in the first place, which is
Mm.
could be as simple as because we want to celebrate it. Like, that's awesome. And then where is this story going to be used? Because you still want to go into it with a plan,
Yes.
um, even though you can still pivot or even multi-use stories. Like so, we've filmed stories that were destined for Sunday morning, and they played on the big screen. But then afterwards, we're like, hey, we want to celebrate that on social media as well, and maybe we're going to put that version on YouTube. But then can we get a vertical version? And no, we didn't shoot it for vertical, but there are ways that you can creatively reformat
Sure.
things.
Mhm.
You just need to make sure you're playing into the strengths of whatever that platform is, which social media that changes just changed and it just changed again, probably changed
Yes.
again.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Changes all the time. Let's talk about a little bit about that plan. When you're planning a story that you want to tell, what are some steps that you should take in that?
So I always try to do if we're talking like a testimony video in this case, because there's multiple types of videos you can make. But if you're telling the story of someone at your church, like you're telling the story of that lady who came to Christ because of the FedEx driver, I
Yes.
always like to start off with a pre-interview. And this is a very informal. I'm going to sit down, have a conversation with you, even less formal than what we're doing here, because it's just like imagine we're at a coffee shop.
Yes.
We got two coffees between us, and I'm a friend wanting to know, like, hey, tell me about what God did in your life. And I
Mhm.
might have some follow up questions just to like dig in a little bit more. But it's just a very informal conversation. And I try not to lean too heavily into the emotion at this stage. Because if a person tells their story too many times and really
Mm.
leans into that emotion, then they can come across more as robotic on
Yes.
Right.
camera.
It's
And
good.
so I try not to lean too heavily into that. Never with the intent of, oh, I want to really lean into the emotion when I'm doing it because I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm trying to get an authentic reaction,
Yes.
but I don't want it to be robotic. And so it's just an informal conversation, but I'll walk away from
Yes.
that conversation knowing like what are the three acts of this story? Like, hey, what was the trial, the problem that they were dealing with,
Mhm.
or the
Mhm.
Yeah.
the struggle. And so
Mhm.
what motivated their first act? And then what was act two? How did they overcome that? Like how did God work through that? How did God impact their life,
Mm.
change their life? What was the main part that happened in the story? And then act three, like, hey, where are they at now? Like and
Yeah.
maybe it's still an ongoing story. Maybe it's a story where I don't think we tell a lot of these in the church, but there's still an opportunity to tell like semi tragic stories to still show how God works even in what feels like tragedy.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so maybe that third act isn't the happy, like, God healed me and now I'm all good. Maybe it's, hey, you know what? We were praying for healing and God healed this person
Yes.
through taking them home. Like,
Right.
but what does that third act look like? So I walk away with kind of a 3-act plan, and I'll have what essentially is called a log line, where if I talk to someone and say, like, "Oh, what is Susan's story about?" Susan's story is one of, that log line will just be a 1 to 2 sentence explanation of the story that someone can get an idea of, like, "Oh, if I hear this story, this is what I'm gonna be hearing about."
Yeah.
Um, and that way, as I'm pitching the story, like, "Hey, I think this would work well for this sermon series," or, "I think we
Yes.
should use this in social media." I have a very quick way to tell someone. But the nice thing is all of this then sets me up for every other stage of the process. So then when I go to the filming stage, I know here are the questions I'm gonna wanna ask to get this
Yeah.
story at the interview. Here's the B-roll that's gonna support the story that we're talking about. So, like, whether I'm doing just, like, general life footage, what footage is gonna fit the mood of the sections I'm talking about, or maybe
Yeah.
I'm trying to capture, like, more abstract footage that's gonna capture the mood. But I know I know the story I'm telling, so I know what I wanna capture for it. And it basically just guides you all the way to the end. And there might be
Yeah.
some minor pivots that happen, but you have a plan that you can then deviate from if needed. But
Yeah.
that way you're not, like, getting to shoot day and being like, all right, now we got to figure out everything all in the course of this interview.
Yes.
Right. I love that you gave permission that it doesn't have to be a, perfect example of, everything just worked out, just rainbow, a pretty picture at the end. Like, it can be someone who's in process, right? It can be someone who's figuring it out, but because of what God has done, because of how the church has been there to support, whatever it may be, that if it's brought them further into their journey, they've been able to take next steps in their faith. So it doesn't have to be this perfectly polished, buttoned up story to be worth telling, right? Because we're all in process, whether whether we like to
Yeah.
admit it or not, right? Capturing those along the way is worth it. It encourages people, right?
So much.
Yeah. Well, and none of our stories are done until the day that we pass away and go see Jesus. Like,
Wow.
we're all a
Mhm.
work in progress until that day. So
Yeah.
don't always feel like the story has to be perfectly buttoned up, because God can
Mm,
still work through a story that's in process. You just want to make sure you're not telling those stories too early to where it's too raw. Like,
mm,
it's a fine line walking that. But
yes.
sometimes those stories that aren't finished can be hey, this is where things are at now. Here's how I've seen God work. Here's where I'm hoping He'll work. But ultimately, it's in His hands.
Yeah.
Why are stories so powerful? Why do they connect with people the way that they do?
I mean, Jesus seemed to love them. So, like, when you look at Jesus' teaching, they're all parables. And
Mhm.
Mm,
he knew that by taking these truths and bringing them down to a point that is like, hey, I'm going to make this so that it's relatable to this culture at this time. And the best way to
Yeah.
mm,
do that is through story. People connected, people understood it better, and they're like, oh, I can follow now. And so there's a certain humanity that comes through a story that takes this lofty idea sometimes and brings it to a point where it's
mhm,
like, oh, this is a little more understandable.
yes.
Not to quote, like, Brandon Lake when he talks about the way he wants to do worship music and talk about, like, the idea of making it more accessible to Bubba. But, like, I think to some extent stories have a power to do that, to where it makes it
Yeah.
a simpler truth for us to follow. And that doesn't mean a story can't be deep. Like,
Right.
when you look at some of the greatest movies out there, they're the movies that I think it's Craig Detweiler talks about, like, the two different types of movies. There's the Saturday night story, which is the Friday night story, where it's like, hey, I've had a long week of work. Like, I love my job, but I'm tired. I don't want to
Yeah.
think tonight. I'm going to put on, no offense to Tom Cruise, I'm going to put on Mission Impossible and just be entertained for 2 hours.
It's
Not
good.
a lot of thinking happening here. But then there's those Saturday night movies where you have those stories that is like, hey, I want to get ready for Sunday. I want something with a little more meat to it, something I can chew on, to
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, I walk away from that movie and I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about it for the next, like, 2 days, because there's so many
Yes.
nuances and, like, deep
Mm.
storytelling things. And so
Yeah.
you've got the multiple types of stories that connect, and they both have their place. It's just a matter of, how you're telling them.
For a church that's wanting to build a culture of storytelling, they want to have more stories on Sunday mornings. They want to have more stories on their social pages or emails or in all their digital platforms. What does it look like to try to build that culture to get these going? What does it look like in real practice?
So it's going to look different for every church, obviously. But if you're at a church where maybe you're wanting to build a volunteer team, maybe you're a single creative at that church. You're like, hey, I've got a basic understanding of video. I just don't have the time to go and do all these stories that we want to tell. Then it's a matter of identifying a volunteer. And I like to talk about like the 3 different levels of volunteer that I see. There's the one that I call the willing heart. That's the person who's like, hey, I would love to do this. I don't
Yeah.
know a thing about storytelling. Like some of our best camera operators on a Sunday morning are people who during the week are accountants and stuff. They have no video background,
Yeah.
but they were like, hey, but I want to learn. And so you figure out like, where are they at now and where do I need to take them? And so with that willing heart, as much as I hate to say this as a filmmaker who, makes a living doing this, maybe you start them filming completely on auto on the camera, and you're teaching them not necessarily the technical
Right.
details of here's your shutter speed, here's your frame rate, and all those sorts of things. Maybe you're starting off by saying, hey, we're going to put it in auto mode, and I want you to learn the 3 different types of shots that you need to be getting. I want you to learn how to capture the content that we need for the story. How do you capture a clean shot that doesn't have distractions in it and focuses on the thing you want to focus on? And then ultimately, how do you identify the story that we want to tell and figure out the pieces that we want to tell? And it's a process. Like, you're going to get a lot of things back. There's like, oh, okay, this is going to take a little while, and that's okay. Like, I teach this for a living, both with volunteers as well as with colleges, and I have students who come back and I'll see their first project. I'm like, all right, we got a lot of work to do, but my goal is between like the first project and the last project to take you from here to here so that you're not going to stay here. Like maybe your last project isn't Sunday morning ready, but maybe it's, hey, now you're understanding framing, you're understanding camera
Yes.
stability, you're understanding some of the basics of storytelling. All right, awesome. You got to keep moving down that path, but maybe it's finding that willing heart, starting them there. And then when they get to that stage where they're like, okay, you've got a basic understanding of some of the technical detail or some of the storytelling details, maybe now we start to dig into a little bit of the technical, and that's like the intermediate.
Yes.
So maybe you start to break them out into like out of the native application on the phone, assuming they're working with a phone, and you start to use like the Blackmagic camera app. And it's like, all right, you can leave this and this on auto, but now let's start to change these settings so that you're
Right.
wondering, you're working with like, what is the white balance of the areas you're filming in? What is the best frame rate? How do you use slow motion effectively? And so how do you find those technical details? And then once they start to get those down and under their belt, then you say, all right, let's go to advanced. Let's go full manual. And now, training wheels are off and you're going to learn all the nitpicky details to where it's like, we get to a point now where maybe we're sending you out because we want you to go tell Susan the story. And here's your brief. Go tell it. And I can't wait to see what you bring back. And so it's a process. But you really need to ultimately have the patience with whatever volunteer you're working with.
Yeah.
But I was just to say, in the same way that my youth pastor saw in me the potential, like, hey, this isn't even in your world of thought process of maybe you should be doing this like for the church on a grander scale than just making stupid videos for Wednesday night youth group. Like he saw that potential in me. Like a large part of it is seeing that potential in other people within your church and saying,
Yes.
hey, you don't see this in yourself, but I see potential in where you can go.
And the truth of it is, Adam, is that somebody saw that in you, right? And that's what brought you to where you are today. Someone saw that in me. I mean, Jess, I know you've had people who saw something in you and invested in you. Where would we be without people who identified that in us? And I just always encourage. That's always a good reminder. It's a good reminder for me and to invest in other people and to just see those things that God has put inside them and really to try to pour into people and give them chances. Just one thing that I feel like I've learned throughout this journey, talking about getting people involved, is it's a little intimidating because you think, okay, if we see this person who maybe isn't a perfect 10 in their skill set for this, but you still want to give them opportunity. Say they have a story that of something that happened in their small group, giving them an opportunity to make some kind of story video like this, and then saying that we're going to share this with our other small groups. That's a smaller audience. There's less of a risk, right? There's less of a high standard for it, right? Than something that's going to go to the whole church. Same thing for youth group. We're going to make this and we're going to show it just on Wednesday night youth group, right? That's what it's the purpose of this video. Or even something, we have a volunteer story. Okay. We're going to show that we're doing this to encourage our volunteers using some of those internal places before maybe it goes to a Sunday morning or to a social media following, right? Those are some ways that you can kind of, have some soft launches and getting people
Yeah.
involved on this. It doesn't have
Good
to be
idea.
the full story, right?
Yeah. Well, something else I encourage too is follow the method of like you show and they watch, or you do and they watch, and then you let them do and you watch, and then eventually they get to a point that they're just doing and you're observing from
Yeah.
afar and giving feedback. But give them opportunities to observe what you're doing. I remember one intern that we had in our department, and I had no idea. I had never seen anything she had done, but she was like, "Hey, I want to learn," and so I was
Yeah.
like, "Awesome!" So she came with me to some campuses, and I gave her a camera. But we filmed two different services. The first service, I literally just gave her a wireless feed of my camera as I walked around the worship center and filming B-roll, and so she was literally just watching the live feed of my camera. She could see when I hit record.
Smart.
She
Wow.
could see how I framed out the shot, and just get an idea of like, "Oh, okay, this is what he's doing." And then the next service is, all right, now I want you to go do it. Like if you do terribly, don't worry about it. Like there's no pressure at all. Like this is an opportunity to learn. And I encouraged her, I said, the best way to learn is to go out and do and make mistakes, because then you learn what not to do. And that's
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
I'm still regularly learning what not to do.
Yeah.
And so that student now is like she's had a lot of people pour into her, so this isn't solely me. But this past semester, she was on set with The Chosen and just interning there, and just she
Wow.
went from
How cool.
not having any video experience to being like an on-set PA volunteer, or not a PA intern for The Chosen.
Yeah.
And I look at her, I'm like, huh. I'm like you're going far. And I mean, she's incredibly talented, but
It's
it all
amazing.
started
so
with
cool.
like just learning and observing.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm just curious, Adam, like what encouragement would you give to leaders who just feel like all of us is so far out of reach?
It's with anything we do in ministry, it's a process, and there's going to be some times where you go and like I would encourage them to not feel like it's out of reach, and go out and be willing to make the mistakes. And I say this knowing that I'm talking to an audience, and myself included, of people who's like, I don't have time for this.
Mm.
But there is so much worth in making that time and finding the opportunities to say, hey, even if I'm just getting a couple shots at an event, to where it's like, hey, maybe I'm going to try and get those like wide, medium, tight shots, or
Yeah.
just to cover some event. Like the more you do it and the more you practice it, the more
Yes.
you're going to make mistakes, but you're going to learn from those mistakes, and the more it becomes a natural reflex. Like I've realized that now. I mean, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been doing teaching this way for 17 years. I've been doing film for 20 years, and I've learned that the more I've gone out and done things, like it's just second nature, to where I can go to an event and in 10, 15 minutes have all the footage I need. And
Wow.
then anything from the rest of it is just like, I have too much now.
Right.
But that's only because I've done it and I've learned what to look for and what to capture.
Yes.
And so basically my encouragement is be willing to go out and just try it. And it doesn't mean you have to do a
Yeah.
fully produced video. Like I have a basic kind of plan of, if you want to cover an event, but you're not doing the whole thing, basically it's a walkthrough of how do you do a basic event with voiceover. And so it says, go out and get these types of shots. And then when you're done, like come back and just record your voiceover. So you're not reliant on like getting an interview in the field. You're not reliant on getting a testimony shot in the field. It's just like, hey, I'm making a 30 to 60 second recap that has
Yeah.
B-roll. The only responsibility you have on the day of is to make sure you're getting a couple B-roll shots with your phone. But that way you're taking the stress off of you to be like, I have to
Yes.
get everything I need for this video right now.
Yeah.
And it just makes it a lot more attainable, a lot more easier. And once you do like 3 or 4 of those, then suddenly it's like, okay, maybe I can add in, like, let's try and do an interview. And if the interview goes badly, you can still fall back to that first plan and then do it differently next time. So
That's
it's
great
a
advice.
process, but
Great advice.
it's worth it.
That's so
great.
good. Well, I know that one of the big themes for our podcast is healthy churches, healthy leaders. And I'm just kind of curious, from your unique perspective, what would you say is one essential component of a healthy church?
The most healthy cultures I've seen are ones that are willing to take risks, but also willing to fail. And what I mean by that is, like, I talked about the idea of, when you're learning this, be willing to fail and to make mistakes. Like I literally tell my students, I'm like, hey, I expect you to fail in this class. Please don't fail the class. Do the work. But I don't expect your first project to be, knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
And I've seen in churches that are willing to allow their their staff and their volunteers to fail and make mistakes and have that safety net is that people are willing to try new things, not for the sake of like impressing other people, but just to try new things to figure out like, is there a better way we can do this? Or is there
Yeah.
an area of ministry we're not doing that
Wow.
maybe if we tried it, we'd realize, hey, this really reaches the community that we're trying to reach, and we
Yes.
wouldn't have tried it. So have a culture where there is a safety net willing to fail, like a willingness to fail, and come alongside people that when they do fail, and help them to know like, hey, you're not a failure, but
Right.
instead you're not defined by this failure, but you tried something new. Is there
Yeah.
something we need to refine to make it better? Or maybe it's just hey, we tried that, didn't work out, and that's okay.
Mm.
But like you're still secure here.
Love that.
That's so
great.
powerful.
Mhm.
Great advice. I'm just curious, Adam, like as we wrap up today, something we love to do is a final five, kind of a rapid fire round to have some fun with it. Are you up for the challenge as we wrap things up today to do this?
I'm up for the challenge.
I
All
love it.
right, let's do it.
Okay, so what is one book on this subject or similar that you recommend to church leaders?
So it's actually a book I've recently heard about when I started teaching one of my new classes I picked up. It's called Go Tell It by Jim Killam and Lincoln Brunner. When I opened up this book, they're both Christians who they were formerly, well, still basically still journalists, but,
Yeah.
Telling all their stories from a Christian standpoint. And
Mm.
I remember when I heard about this was a book for the class, I was like, okay, I'll take a look at it. It was a new class I picked up. And I read through the entire thing like that. Like it is
Wow.
such a good book, especially for
Okay.
someone who, like, if you're a church who's like, hey, I want to like figure out like what does it even mean to tell a story? Like this
Yeah.
is a great book.
Okay, that's very intriguing. Okay, last thing you listen to on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you stream music.
I have been this. I don't know which one of these are the last one, but I have been playing the newest 21 Pilots album on
Yeah,
Breach
it's a good
on
one.
repeat, and then also NF dropped his new LPE, whatever, the short album, and I have been playing those two pretty much nonstop. They are so good.
Awesome. Okay. Favorite piece of technology or software right now?
So the thing that gave me, I used to hate video editing, and the thing that gave me my love back is DaVinci Resolve. From like I could go on all day long why it's such a great piece of software. One of which
Yeah.
is it's free.
Mm.
But or you get seats from if you buy one of their cameras, you get them for free. But it reminded me why I like that side of storytelling by making it the software not be in the way and just
Yeah.
be fun to use. It's a little overwhelming when you first open it, but I remember
Okay.
I picked it up, forced myself to do a project in it, and I was like, okay, I made it through. And then I did another one. I was like, wait, this is fun. I'm enjoying editing.
So cool. Okay. Okay, so quote or advice that stuck with you over the years.
So one of the best quotes I think I've ever heard that really stuck with me and helped me through a hard season is comparison is the root of all inferiority. And the idea that if you're comparing your work to someone else's, you're going to feel inferior because
Yep.
there's only one number one in the world. So therefore, unless you happen to be that number one, which probably none of us are in any of the things that we do, because there's 8 billion people in the world, there's always going to be someone who's better than you. And so if
Yeah.
you're comparing your story to theirs, if you're comparing your work to theirs, you're going to feel inferior. But in reality, it is God has us all where He has us for a
Yeah.
reason,
Yes.
and He has us in the place where we are best equipped to do the work that He has called us to do.
Wow.
And so therefore we shouldn't be sitting here comparing ourselves to other people.
Right.
Instead,
Right.
acknowledging like, hey, I can get inspired by other people's work. That's great and
Yes.
healthy, but I shouldn't define myself by that because that's not how God defines me.
Yeah,
Great
it's kind of
wisdom.
rude to the Lord when we do that in general. Like I have to remind myself of that constantly. Like that's really rude that I'm diminishing his
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I had a
Um,
really hard season years ago that I was comparing myself to other people and like that. And that's when I heard this quote. And I just realized I'm like, hey, God doesn't define me by my creative work. He doesn't define me by
Right.
any of those things. He defines me
Right.
by what He says in scripture. And
Mhm.
when I had that revelation, it gave me this freedom to, in a healthy sense, not
Right.
care what other people thought of me. Like I still
Yeah.
care, like, but from where I
Yes.
was, I realized I'm like, hey, I don't need to worry about if someone thinks this is the best video ever. I
Right.
instead need to say, like, am I giving it my all? And am I telling what I think is the best story that God wants me to tell? Then that's the story I need to tell.
Yes.
Good
Amen.
wisdom.
Yep. Okay, one thing you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders.
So if you're someone who's jumping into this creative world, or if you're someone who's already in the creative world, one of the best lessons I've ever learned is that I am not defined and you are not defined by the work that you
Mm,
produce.
yeah.
Um, it is so easy for us to look at the work that we're doing and to basically use that as a measure for how God looks at us and
Yeah.
how successful we are in God's eyes. When reality is we are not defined by the work that we do. We are defined by who God has said that we are.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it is incredibly important to understand that, because if we don't understand that, when a project goes wrong or doesn't work
Mhm.
out, which is going to happen, and I don't care how long you've been doing this, there's going to be a
Yes.
project that doesn't go to plan and might fail completely, get cut on a Sunday morning, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
You can't let that define you. You
Yes.
instead need to remember, A, who has God said that I am? Okay, there's
Right.
peace there. And then look and say, is there anything from this failure I can learn from that maybe next time I can do differently? If not, brush it off and just, it's easier said than done. Pick yourself up and go to the next
Yes.
project. But if
Yes.
there's something, then say, okay, I wish we had done a little more pre-production, or I wish we had done this. So next time I'm going to try and figure out a way to build that in. But
So
ultimately,
good.
don't let your creative failures define you. And I
Mm.
wish someone had told me that earlier on, because I would be, well, I'm in a better place now, but I would have been in a better place when I needed it earlier on.
Sure. Oh,
That's so good. And honestly, it's when I think that applies to any area of your life, but I
yes.
do think that there is another level of um, depth to failure in that capacity because it is a public thing. You're showing your work very
It's on
publicly.
display.
It's
Yeah.
artistic in a way,
Yeah.
I mean, not in a way, it is artistic. And so with that, you're presenting your work publicly, and there's a vulnerability that comes with
Mm.
that. I think
Yes.
that's beyond just what did my boss say or whatever. Like it's a broader question. So that's a great reminder. And I think just bringing some depth to it in the way that you did is really thoughtful because that would be a slippery slope for me. That my work doesn't. I do webinars that people watch, but it's I'm not attached to that. My heart's not attached to that. My worth is not attached to that, right? And so
Right.
storytelling, you're putting a part of your heart into that.
Mm.
So that's a great word.
It's a good word for today. Thank you so much for your time that you spent with us today, Adam. I know that people are going to want to hear more from you. They're going to want to follow you and stay connected with your work. What's the best place for them to keep up with you?
Two best places to follow me would be obviously on YouTube with Smartphone Storytellers. Just search for that and you'll find it. It's got the little red phone or little white phone on a red background. But a better place to be would be smartphonestorytellers.com, because all my videos are posted there as well. But that's also the hub that any of the exciting things I've got coming up, some upcoming trainings, or if you want to contact me, if you want me to come out and do some trainings with you guys, or just online talks, that's the best best place to get in contact.
I love that. Well, for
Sounds
all of
good.
our listeners out there, be sure to check out these resources. We're going to link everything up in the show notes to make it super easy. And again, just thank you so much for all the insights and all the wisdom that you share with us today. I know that it's going to make a big difference for these ministry leaders out there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I was honored to be able to jump on with you guys and talk about it.
It's been awesome. And for all of our listeners out there, I would just say if this episode has encouraged you, if you've picked up
Mhm.
some ideas or some inspiration through it, would you consider sharing this with a friend? Just help us to get the word out to as many people and ministry leaders out there as possible, because we want to help them. We want to equip them to do things like tell stories right there in their communities. Also, if this has brought any value to you, leave us a review. We love reading those reviews. It makes a big difference for
Mhm.
us. Hit that follow button. We want to make sure that you're subscribed. But for all of you out there, thank you again for listening along today as we've had this conversation. Until next time, keep leading well right there in your community, and we will see you right back here next time on Church Leadership Lab.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way, in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.